integrated Dell remote access controller built into it. Checking to see whether something's plugged into the LAN port on it is good. It's not sufficient because the iDRAC also can be tapped directly into the Intel Active Management Technology chipset that is built into the Intel chipset. So it's been built into the processors, the Xeons on the servers. It's built into the i5, 7, and 9 series chipsets that are in all the Dell workstations. And so the iDRAC is basically, yes, it has its own LAN port, but that's not the only way that you can use it to connect to sort of, I would call them like super user functions and configuration capability and access on both the iDRAC server itself and on any machines that are connected to it by hardwire or accessible to it through either wireless or through a bridge created by use of removable media devices.
Shawn, I got a question for you.
Sure. So, Dave.
Okay. Raymond Garcia here, chairman of the Colorado Hispanic Republicans. So am I to understand that there are machines that are hardwire connected?
Yeah, within both the clear ballot system that's in Garfield and Douglas counties and within the Dominion system in other 62, the ImageCast central tabulators are connected by a LAN cable to the election management system servers, and so are adjudication workstations. So any vulnerability, for example, like I've talked about this in other places, last year, early in the year, maybe at the end of 2022, I can't remember exactly when I looked it up. I could go back and check. I found that there were 104 of the Dominion Democracy Suite ImageCast central tabulators in Colorado where the Dell computer for the tabulator, the ICC, was registered to an Australian entity. In other words, it did not belong, according to Dell, to any U.S. entity, including a county or state government. And they had been ordered from Dell by Dominion and then introduced into Colorado, fielded with the Secretary of State's blessing, with wireless networking cards built into them. Every one of those 104 Dominion tabulators in Colorado, and that wasn't all the tabulators. That was probably maybe half. I looked up all of them, but every one of them was equipped with a Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, wireless networking card, or dual band card. And then in addition, the Dominion system also had every one of the Samsung tablets that were used as ImageCast X, which is the touchscreen assisted voting ballot marking device. Those all had wireless networking built into them. And then about half of the ImageCast voter activation laptops, which are the laptops that are used to program the smart cards that a voter would put into the ICX when they go to vote, that would identify which ballot style they should be using and authenticate to the ICX so that it would bring that up and allow them to print that ballot.
Okay, that's what I was wondering about. I'm concerned about the Bluetooth or wireless capability. If I'm hearing you right, that there are like Ethernet cables connected to these now?
There are Ethernet cables connected to the election management system servers and the ImageCast central tabulator computers, which are a Dell workstation. Usually they're an all-in-one. They used to use 7440s. They also use some like 3070s, 3090s. Now they're using some 6 series. But they're typically an all-in-one, meaning it looks like a monitor, but the monitor has the computer built into it. So it's just a monitor, keyboard, and mouse with LAN and other cables coming out the back. So yeah, those systems are connected, and you can look this up. If you look on the Secretary of State site under elections, under voting systems, and then look up certified systems, and the current version that is in most counties is 5.17. Some are still using 5.13 or 5.13 alpha. You look in the technical documentation under the Democracy Suite system description or functional descriptions, and you'll find a diagram in there, and the diagram shows you that the ImageCast central tabulators are connected by a LAN cable to the election management system servers, and so are adjudication workstations. Any workstation off the server is typically connected by a LAN cable to the EMS server. That doesn't mean they're connected to an outside network. But if one of those ImageCast Central tabulators computers also has wireless networking, well, now you've connected that entire democracy suite system in that county basically to a wireless network, because the clerks can't control. There's no way for them to control whether that wireless card is on or off.
So there is a way. That's why I was wondering about the wireless feature of this, not the landline feature of it, because you could put a Faraday cage on the outside, not even touching the machine, but that would negate any Bluetooth or wireless capability of it.
You would have to have it around every machine, and you would have to have that in place from the time that you were conducted a trusted build until the time you had certified an election to have any confidence that the system software configuration and firmware was unaltered. If you have that, it's like a shield. You have the shield down at any moment, then all bets are off, because in effect, each component of the system is either connected by LAN or gets repeatedly connected with removable media. Even the smart card that goes from the ICBA laptop to tell the ICX which ballot style to load, that smart card not only carries some of the keys that are used in the whole entire system, so that you can get from that smart card the keys you would need to be able to access other components and the elections database, but that smart card could itself be carrying malware or executable code, or a portion of executable code that when it's stuck into the ICX, then that code combines with other code.
Yeah.
Of course, Griswold and Beal just keep saying that there's no concern with these machines unless you had physical access to them. Okay, we know there have been hundreds of people that have had physical access between the primary and the general election at this point, but is there something to say you have to look a little bit deeper here than just saying everything's fine?
Yes, there are things. I don't think it's quite that pat. I mean, you could point at the testimony that I gave in the Denver District Court, which the judge, I don't think even understood, or maybe didn't want to understand. I think Clay submitted a declaration, and you probably have to ask. But also the testimony that he gave in the DeKalb County GOP versus Raffensperger case in Georgia, because everything he said about the vulnerabilities in the systems in Georgia is true about the systems in Colorado. And you have to understand the kind of provenance or the history of version numbers to understand that. So some of the Colorado counties for Dominion are using 5.13 and some are using 5.17, one version or another of 5.13. But 5.17 is not a derivative of 5.13. It doesn't evolve from 5.13. 5.17 is derived from 5.5 delta, which is derived from 5.5C, from 5.5B, which is Arizona, and 5.5A, which is Georgia. So the last common version number that 5.17 and 5.13 have goes all the way back, I think, to 5.0. And so the vulnerabilities that they identified in Georgia are present in the system in Colorado, including the exposure of the keys. I mean, the forensic team verified that the keys are stored in plain text on the Dominion system in Mesa County from the Mesa County images. That's not the only one. They verified on several images. And so that vulnerability of key storage is more significant than people understand. This is part of the problem that we face, is that we, just like our election officials, most of them are not particularly technical. And you can't just be a little technical to understand the significance of these things. And they're disregarding the statements of people like Clay and Ben Cotton, who are actually, cyber forensic examiners who understand the significance. If you expose the X509 key, or if you expose the Raindale key, which is like an AES, like an encryption sort of kernel at the base of all of your keys that protect your system, you expose that by posting it in plain text, all bets are off for the system. because that key allows you to get into the system and do things like alter the audit logs. Once you can alter the audit logs, you can do anything you want, and it's not detectable. It doesn't matter how much auditing you do after the fact. And so those vulnerabilities, those kind of vulnerabilities are unrecoverable for all practical purposes. You might be able to take it to like a very exquisitely capable team, like one of the FireEye teams or a 6th-gen team or somebody like that who does a lot of defense work. And they take the best guys who come out of the service red teams or the service offensive teams. And then they, continue to develop their skills for years, sometimes decades. Those guys might be able to find something, but it would take them a while. And they'll never be able to clear the systems because the hardware itself is built without supply chain security. So, but trying to get a judge in a court to understand this, and this is the magic of their fraud, is they perpetrated a system that the average person can't even understand, and public officials can't understand, and they're afraid to admit they can't understand.
Do you know if our systems run some sort of I'm told it's called Dell Open Manage for remote access?
So Open Manage isn't something that would be installed on the systems. Open Manage is kind of like a dashboard and a service that would be used where you would take, like, let's say I had a Dell server here at my house. I actually do have a Dell server at my house, but let's say I had a Dell server at my house. And then I had, under my organization, 3 workstations that were remotely distributed. Open Manage would be the dashboard and application I would use to remotely manage their configuration. It's an interface that lets you take advantage of and interfaces with both iDRAC and the Intel Active Management technology in the chipsets, which the significance of which doesn't matter what you do in the operating system from an auditing perspective. You can do things with Open Manage and Intel AMT that alter the configuration of the system completely outside the operating system, and the operating system doesn't even see it.
Right, but
there's no record in the operating system.
Colorado doesn't have that, right?
Well, it wouldn't be something, you mean like that they're using at the state level to manage remotely, or do you mean on our voting systems? Because it wouldn't be, that's what I'm saying, is you wouldn't put it on the voting system.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
This is something that would...
Is there something like that? We've heard reports, I don't know whether they're Colorado now or whether they were nationwide, where Dominion would remote in and quick fix something in the middle of an election.
Open Manage would be something they would use to do that, not something that would be on the machines. What's on the machines is all they would need, and that is the Intel Active Management technology, and then that registration number. This is why it was significant that the ImageCast Central tabulators, and some of which are still in use in Colorado right now, by the way, they were used in this election. There are tabulators that were used in this election, let alone the last 4 years, that are registered. The Dell computer is registered to an Australian entity. That entity has the authority, according to Dell, to add the system to their dashboard for management. Now all they need is a moment where that system is connected to any external network, or it can be done purely off removable media. You can flash and manage configuration from removable media without ever having it connected to an external network.
Yes. So first and foremost, welcome Colorado Republicans, and thank you for joining us on tonight's call. Our objectives are going to be very clear, and they are very critical. First, we'll address the seriousness of the BIOS passwords breach, and discuss its implementations for the Colorado and for 25 other states, as Debbie Perry-Smith just mentioned. Second, we'll dive into the purpose and the impact of submitting affidavits to the judicial districts, DAs. Third, we're going to empower a statewide effort to provide tools and guidance for submitting these affidavits. And finally, we will discuss ways to support our county clerks in their critical role, ensuring that they are informed on the implementations of certifying this election both statewide and nationally. So with that, tonight's discussion is going to be dedicated to 2 calls of action. I ask that we hold our questions until after our guests have spoken. to keep this format moving forward and to be very focused and succinct. I want to thank each and every one of you for taking time tonight and your dedication to its important cause. So now I'm going to go ahead and give the floor back to Debbie, or is Dave on?
And is our guest speaker on? Is Mr. Clay Parikh on yet? Has anybody seen him? There you are.
Hey.
Good evening. Ladies and gentlemen, I give the floor tonight to one of the most really renowned ethical hackers in the country. Take it away, Clay. Thank you again.
All right. And I guess, was there any introduction, or did it need to introduce yourself? I'm sorry, because I came on late. I was actually talking about Georgia. There's some stuff going on there too. All right. So for those who don't know me in the audience, I'm Clay Parikh. I'd tell you, retired U.S. Marine was the first profession. Then I got my degree in computer science. I now have a master's in cybersecurity based on computer science. I've been doing the cybersecurity work for about 20 years. I've held all the top certifications, CISSP, CEH, CHFI. So that means I can do anything and everything within the realm of information security and cybersecurity. The most important thing about me, though, concerning elections, is I worked in several of the voting system test labs for over a 9-year time span. So I started in 2008 and went to 2017 when I basically walked away. And because it was a part-time job, I was the only security professional that worked in these labs. And the reason I walked away is because I was tired of the rubber stamping outfit. It was much like a lot of the federal contracting stuff I see with the federal government, but although sometimes this included the secretaries of states because they certify their own systems. It's all dependent on the states. They were just approving things no matter what I found. So I walked away. Then 2020 happened, and believe it or not, that's one of the few times my wife actually said, "Well, are you going to say something?" You know, usually she's telling me to shut up or kicking me in the shin or something. This time she gave me that look like, "You need to stand up and say something," and so I did. And since then, it's been a whirlwind of court cases, testifying, and pro se cases. A lot of them unknown because they're at county levels and stuff. But all I'm doing is providing the technical truth to the issues at hand. And believe me, I read the Help America Vote Act and the voting system guidelines long before people were worried about elections. Again, I did all that at the beginning of 2008. And so anyway, so that's me in a nutshell. The important things that concern Colorado is I'm going to cover the big one first. For those who have Dominion systems, those systems are not certifiable. They violate certification. If you've got anything that talks about FIPS compliant within them, it's not there because they're not. And believe me, I've read FIPS 140-2 more times than anyone would ever care to. I've explained to voting system vendors, and different ones, because I've tested over like 7 different vendors that I can remember offhand, is that they didn't understand it either. And that's the sad thing. And I would have to explain to them what it meant and what cryptographic module means and how these components work. And that you can't write your own encryption algorithm. And 2, for the one vendor that did that, I broke it in like about 2 hours. So my point on all this is the systems shouldn't be used at all. If you have any doubt of that, I suggest you go to the U.S. Supreme Court case that Kerry Lake Mark Fincham filed up there and pull my declaration down. It's in detail and it covers the Mesa County, Colorado image and what was discovered there, thanks to Tina Peters doing her job as a county clerk. And so then that brings us to Georgia and Arizona, which also had their databases analyzed. And it, again, all tied into Mesa County. And this brings me to the worst part about how Colorado could have caused other states' elections to be compromised. And that's with what's called an X509 certificate. This security certificate is stored in the database in the same table as the Rangdale keys and its vector and the HMAC key. These four things are critical to the integrity and the security of the election, the voting system. This handles the encryption, the decryption. It handles securing the communication paths. It's for verification of integrity stuff. Although that table and its sets, all those items are in plain text. And this is just within the election system. And I'm going to say system, but remember, we're talking about the components of the system as well. And I can answer questions on that later if you need to be, because these things actually reside outside the election management server as well, which is another egregious violation by the vendors themselves. But anyway, so you've got this horribly secure. It's horrible. It's not really secured at all. The database. You've got the key set in plain text for anybody that gets to the system to grab them. And then you've got the operating system, which has hundreds of vulnerabilities on it and is highly insecure. So you take each one of these bad components, they're supposedly stored under stringent physical security, which the first rule of security is always act like you've been compromised. And the second rule is, if you rely on physical security alone, you've been hacked. So you go back to rule 1 that you act like you've already been compromised. And that's just the way it is. If I hear the feed line, I don't know if you follow other states. I've got like 29 folders on different states in this country of ours. I've heard that line and I hear the same things that these county officials, state officials are told to say, which is basically well, I'm not going to say the whole word. I'm going to use a technical term. It's called BS, right? When we use the technical term, we just say the complete word, but that's exactly what it is. It's nothing but BS to make you think that everything's okay. So this X509 certificate is the same across multiple states. It's in different versions of Dominion, and it's the same across all these versions. If you look at the Georgia case of DeKalb County GOP versus Rathensberger, you'll see myself and Ben Cotton, and we testified to this. I can show you the evidence. I can show you the databases that were all obtained legally and show you that they're exactly the same. But there's a video, believe me, if you're on social media, there's a video of me showing this already. It's in my Georgia declaration as well, screenshots from this. And so that's what you have to understand. Your password compromise and the security breach could affect the other 25 states that have Dominion systems. Now, to your security breach specifically, I obtained files that were downloaded from that site on October 25th and told to keep them in a safe place. So I did. I put them up on one of my data servers in Proton, so I knew it was secured, and didn't really look at them until I saw the GOP press release, and then I knew, even though the affidavit was redacted, I knew who it was, and so I looked at the files, examined them. I examined their metadata, and in this time, I estimated around June 20th or 21st is when they got posted to the Secretary of State's website. And of course, they went down, according to Ms. Griswold, October 24th. So for over 4 months. That very next day, from an attorney, I got another copy of a file that was downloaded from a different person at an earlier date than what Shawn Smith had first downloaded, which was it was either June 20 or 21st. I was only off by day in my analysis of when it got posted. Now, that's just from the known, and I'm only speaking to those dates, so I'm only going to say over 4 months. I have heard and seen that it could have been as early as April. But what I have to do as a professional and talking only about technical, whether it's in digital forensics or whatever you ask me to analyze or I get paid to do, that's what I have to present. So I can tell you for a fact, for slightly over 4 months, those passwords were publicly available on the internet. Now, the next point I want to make is, and Shawn asked me this question, and I answered this question before we finished asking it. And for you people are lucky to have Colonel Shawn Smith up there in Colorado fighting for election integrity, because he's one intelligent man and he's highly knowledgeable on election stuff. It's amazing how quick he's learned this stuff. So anyway, back on track, Clay. So what he asked me about was the file path to the share server, because that Excel spreadsheet had a data link. It's how it got updated, was from this share that the Secretary of State office talked about, where they had limited access. What I can tell you is with that file path, people like myself, or that are a heck of a lot better than me, could have already been probing your state to that actual storage, that file share, and could have probably accessed it outside of the spreadsheet. Because guess what? If they go to the target of the data source, they know there's going to be other data there that could be even more valuable. And so this brings me to the risk analysis and assessment part. When I do things as a security professional, you have to look at it holistically. And there's risk analysis and assessment. A little background on my experience with that. I was with the working group that designed the risk analysis and assessment group for the Missile Defense Agency years back. I helped Health and Human Services infrastructure develop one so they could beat up their CIO office, that the head security person for the Health and Human Services, when they would bicker back and forth about what was allowed and what the requirements are. Because when you do this process and you analyze your risk, and there are different types of risks, there's business risks and all that, but we're going to speak specifically about technical risk. When you analyze your risk and you assess it, you can come up and you can say, this is the consequence, this is the likelihood, this is the damage it could cause, and you do this rating and scale thing. So let's look. U.S. elections. We've already claimed Russia interference, right? From 2016 on. We're a prime target. Trillions of dollar economy. The number one free nation in the world. Well, we used to be free. And so it's a prime target, especially for advanced persistent threats, aka the foreign people, and it can include criminals. So these things are going to make Secretary of State's office, county election department offices, prime targets for anything that they have what's called publicly facing, your websites. So likelihood on that's going to be high. And with that, the time frame of over 4 months publicly accessible. Now, there was a downplay. What I saw, 63 of the 64 counties. They say there were only 31 active. There was no extra data given by the Secretary of State's office on that. Therefore, it makes me think they're trying to minimize the impact already by just saying things. If you're following me, I'm not going to call anybody a liar, but they were saying things without providing you information. 63 layers of physical security. Are all 63 counties same in population? No, they're not. You've got small counties, you've got large counties. Just like I got off the phone, we were talking about Fulton County, where Atlanta is, the largest county in the South, probably. And then Floyd County, up near Alabama, further north, that's only got 100,000 people in the county. There's quite a difference between the infrastructure there, the physical security that's incorporated by the counties there. And so what you have to understand is, in the wide disbursement of counties, what's the likelihood of one outsider getting past the physical security layers and getting to a component? Let alone if logic and accuracy happens and they're setting up doing the components of the systems, and they just do a so-called local network. If the county switch has been had, if they've had access through the router, they've already got the BIOS password. And I could get into some nerdy details and tell you about the 2 types of BIOS passwords, what they can do, and how I make an educated guess, and I'm calling it educated guess, but I know 99.99% chance of the type of password they implemented. Otherwise, they would have state representatives in every county to start up every election component system. And that just clearly didn't happen. So you've got that factor that goes in. Then you get the statements, I'm not going to say excuses, although that's what they sounded like to me, of they've already analyzed and said there's no evidence. So they've checked a 4-month time period of 24/7 camera data, access logs into those rooms, and have already evaluated that we saw no nefarious deeds take place. Just on that alone. You sit there and think about, how true is that statement? Then he was the CISO, the Chief Information Security Officer, who checked the BIOS, who really didn't know what the BIOS is, which sort of startled me that he's a CISO. And here's what I want to tell you is, just going in and changing the password it does make a log entry. When you change the password, if you enter the password correctly, there is no log entry. And I could look, BIOS, just real quick, don't ask me what CMOS is because I'd be here for 2 hours trying to explain all the technical parts. But BIOS passwords, BIOS event entries, all that stuff, that gets stored in the CMOS. And that's where the log entries are. So if you enter the correct password, there's no entry for that. If you change the BIOS password, there is an entry. So even if they check the logs, they wouldn't detect somebody accessed it that wasn't supposed to, unauthorized access. Secondly, if you get into the BIOS, anybody of any semi-technical skill can make the BIOS look like the wireless is still turned off, that the configuration looks one way. I'm telling you, as I stated in my declaration or my affidavit for the Colorado court, that I can put the malware there. I'm going to put it in the BIOS and it starts up. Now, and that's going to lead me, and I sort of want to tidy it up because I know we're under a timeline, is on the excuse about 2 passwords required. I am going to say this. That's a bold-faced lie. Because if both passwords were required, that means you've got to have the BIOS password and the operating system password. So you're telling me that, again, the state of Colorado has a state representative from the Secretary of State's office in every county, all 64 counties, when they start up the components for the election machines to put in the BIOS password. No, doesn't happen, does it? They've got the configuration for the BIOS password block. Therefore, the BIOS password is not required to start up the system and actually access the voting system, right? That takes the operating password. Now, what I will tell you, though, is if I have the BIOS password, all other passwords are irrelevant. I can create my own account, my own password. I can remove the account I need to get administrative access. For example, Mesa, Colorado's EMS image, I turned it into a virtual machine. Guess what? Somebody provided me a default password that didn't work. Clay just went to what he knows. I went to the BIOS password. I hit the system. I removed the EMS admin password. When the system came up, I simply clicked log in with the EMS screen, admin screen there. It logged me in with no password. I then accessed the election database, and that's how I got in and saw everything I needed to see. I have since created my own EMS admin password. So with the BIOS password, just this, it's not a partial, it was a complete BIOS passwords for those components. With that, all other passwords are irrelevant. Irrelevant. So that excuse of there's 2 required was a bold-faced lie. And I'm just saying, She probably doesn't know the difference anyway, but the technical people that provided her that information were incorrect. And that's what you have to understand. Everything was explained to downplay the severity of this. What I'm telling you is as I stated to several people, the likelihood that those passwords have been compromised and possibly used is highly likely. The worst thing is several of those components allow access to an X509 certificate, which could compromise other voting systems in other stinking states and counties outside of Colorado. And now I see two people that I absolutely know nothing about this stuff raising their hands. So, but that's it in a nutshell. That's my professional opinion on this and my analysis on the system, on these spreadsheets. And what I'm telling you is there is no way that the actions done by the Secretary of State's office did anything to rectify the problem. And we could get in a whole side thing about the operational aspect of this and how the Secretary of State's office conducted this, even the password changes, which was highly unprofessional. But that's a whole nother thing.
Thank you, Clay. I want to, Shawn, are you still with us? Shawn, is there anything that you would like to dovetail into Clay's comments?
Oh, Shawn,
No,
Shawn Smith,
I can't. Yeah. Hey, I wasn't on when you started. I was on earlier and then I had to drop for another call and I got to come back on. I don't think I'm going to add anything to what Clay's saying. It's like trying to gild the lily. But he knows the systems far better than I do. I know this Secretary of State and her staff. I think
Shawn,
pretty
you're
well
an
at this
expert.
point.
I'm not.
Exactly.
Everybody knows what he's talking about. It's just absurd to say that Clay is not an expert in Colorado voting systems. That entire line of assertion in that courtroom, the Attorney General doesn't actually, I don't believe, care what's true, but their assertion that somehow Clay is not an expert in Colorado voting systems is absurd and would require such gross ignorance of the architecture of the voting systems. It's almost unimaginable. Like how can you have justice in a court where the people you're depending on don't even understand the words you're using?
Hey, and I want to interrupt this because we both know what it was really about. And so, one, I'm going to make the general statement. The BIOS does not care what the operating system is. It does not care what applications are, what version the applications are, whether they're certified or not. So it's irrelevant. And two, your voting system is nothing but applications. It's actually a poorly designed database with a bunch of stored procedures that are highly questionable in themselves. And believe me, if I put my two database women on it, we would still be analyzing the stored procedure from Mesa County because I could tell. I don't want to distract, but that's the first point. The second point is why I was astounded when the attorney had to go to the door and let Shawn in the courtroom, but yet I was treated like an expert witness and allowed to be in the court, even though it's via Zoom, like an expert witness is allowed to be. But then when it came time to question me, I wasn't. And this is the whole thing. I'm not an attorney, but objection foundation. They use that on me. So what does that mean? Clay doesn't know what he's talking about. He's not an expert. So therefore, Your Honor, you can't really judge off anything he says because it's a moot point. He's just some idiot on a Zoom call who doesn't know anything. And that's the whole thing. It was legalese warfare, right? Don't have the expert be an expert, and now we can object on everything he's asked because the minute he opens his mouth, we'll say objection foundation.
Well, and that's the Attorney General or the assistants in there were making the assertion to the court, and the court accepted the assertion, and it required ignorance on the part of the court. I'm sorry, but that's the truth. And either ignorance or malfeasance and deception on the part of the Attorney General, right? To say the Colorado voting system. There's no significant difference between Colorado's voting system and any other Dominion democracy suite fielded in the last probably 6 years minimum. And you can go through their technical descriptions and their manuals, and we have. And Clay's gone through the components of them. I've literally looked up the components of multiple state systems. I've done sworn declarations on them, which, by the way, I think part of the reason is I was admitted as a fact witness because of the affidavit regarding the BIOS, and then they additionally asked me questions with respect to my opinion. But your role was to be purely as an expert. Of all the people in there, there was nobody who was even in the same vicinity of expertise as Clay, and somebody who knew so little that she literally, the assistant attorney general, asked me if I had examined any of Colorado's electromechanical voting system. And that's why I said, you don't have any electromechanical voting system. You haven't had any electromechanical voting system in at least 6 years. No, that's not right. 8 years. You haven't had a single, what are you talking about? And the judge is just sitting there like, oh, that's fascinating. But the attorney general staff and the attorney general himself for sure, and the secretary of state for that matter, they don't even know what you're talking about when you use these terms. And that's part of what makes it so difficult to get to any sort of a just and reasonable conclusion and ruling in a court, is because, and it's the same with our election officials, right? How many election officials have you heard in a Republican county say, yeah, maybe that's happening in Boulder, but not here. That's not happening here. You don't have the slightest idea. You don't have any idea what's happening on your system. That's the truth. It needs to be
a jury of nerds, a jury of technical nerds that have worked in the profession for a couple of years. Yeah, that understand what's being spoken in court. Yeah, I agree. But enough on the legalese of it. We do need to get back to the severity of the security breach, because it was a very serious security breach.
Yeah. Mark, do you have something to add into the security breach part?
One of the misstatements that were made, we'll say misstatements that a lie, I guess. No, it's a lie, is that the BIOS password, that you need physical access to be able to abuse the system if you had the BIOS password. And that is absolutely not true. Anyone that knows Dell systems well knows about DCCU or DCCT, which is Dell Configuration Utility Toolkit, which is a piece of software that system administrators that need to make changes to a bunch of different Dell machines can actually send this software out. It runs within the operating system, and it will, from within the operating system, go out into the BIOS to make changes in the BIOS itself.
Most people I'm laughing because Mark is getting way too dirty on you. But look, and he's absolutely correct. Here's what you have to understand. And I've said this to the attorney beforehand and everything. Listen, the BIOS password and protecting that configuration, I will tell you, the Department of Defense requires this as well. It's built in. We also do hard disk encryption on every system. And what you have to understand, that's like the very first step they do to trying to secure it. But for those who know, like myself and Mark and others, the BIOS password is really irrelevant, but it needs to be there. It's a DOD requirement. It's a Department of Defense goes by this. Every federal agency does. And so that's why the first thing I led with was how horribly designed and built and configured the Dominion voting systems are. If we listed the vulnerabilities, we'd be here all night. And there are multiple attacks for these vulnerabilities. So what Mark, and maybe a little bit too nerdy for him, you're usually good about teaching.
Me too nerdy?
No, you're good about, Mark's really good. He's explained some things really good from a teaching aspect. I've watched him in Texas and stuff. But for those who didn't track it, just trust me, there are other access points that can get to these systems, and they're that horribly configured. So sorry, Mark.
And there's no way to control them. There's no way to secure them. There's no way to control them. And the people that are responsible for using them and securing them for our elections don't have the slightest clue how to properly do it. Even the IT staff in the counties don't have a clue how to properly secure a system that is deemed critical infrastructure.
Yeah. So one of the issues that I have is that I heard Clay's testimony. I mean, not Clay, but Shawn's testimony, but I didn't see any, I would call it backup evidence or modeling that was used or stuff that could show kind of the configurations and what was possible. And I know that their side didn't present anything of any consequence. So I guess I'm a little bit kind of struck by the fact that Colorado was the only state to go against the national trend of going red. And yet it's the only state where you had BIOS passwords that were actually released months ago and in violation of our own rules. So, I think that I assume that this meeting is about working the problem. Is that what this is about? Working the problem?
It's working the problem in a couple of calls to action that we have, because we're on a short fuse, with certifications being next week.
Okay, so you're going to try and you get people to not certify?
Yes.
Okay, so you're going to need a white paper and you're going to need models by which you present to all the groups that are actually going to be certifying, because you're not hold on. You're not going to get anybody to put it on the line and not certify an election unless they have actual hard data, things they have in their hand that's provable facts, with a group of people that are willing to sign affidavits to that effect. And you have 64. I assume this is going to affect Mark, Shawn, 50 of those 64. Mark?
Yeah, I believe there were way more than 50 in there. The elections in Colorado really, unfortunately, seem to be irredeemably compromised, and they probably need to all be redone. This is such an absolute disaster on so many levels, and the way it was handled was absolutely ridiculous. There was no investigation done, at least not what they should have investigated. And if someone claims there was, show me the proof. I would love to see it. I doubt anyone even knows what to look at to see if there was a compromise.
They don't look, because I watched the rest of the trial, and their CISO, that Chief Information Security Officer, I don't know what he did before, but I would have liked to know what his certifications are, what his education background is, because it was apparent to me he is not a security professional. And two, you bring up a lot of good points, because here's the thing: there's certain information. It was. And Mark, I know you can jump in on this one. It was a website. There's one thing you do if you're monitoring a website, even if you're not really monitoring it, but you're just running the website. How many times was it accessed in a month?
And what IP?
Where did that get access from? You're at least going to know the IPs. Now, did the Secretary of State's office authorize an investigation just from the pure fact of being able to get the legal thing to go to the ISPs and end up tracing these IPs back to the destination, because you got to find out who it was. Yeah, none of that's happened. How many times was the file downloaded? This is all basic information that Mark's not any IT professional that's conducting an investigation or looking into what's called incident response is going to do these things that we're telling you right now. How many times was it downloaded? Who opened it up and looked at it online? All these things they did not tell the citizens, the residents of Colorado, anything about that, because they didn't do anything.
So Clay,
clerks, that's what kills me. They didn't tell any of the clerks. Yeah. I'm so upset for all the clerks that have been lied to this whole time, and that this whole thing happens, and she didn't have the audacity to tell the clerks.
Incredible. So listen, we've got what, 6 or 7 clerks that are paying attention, that feel like they've been hoodwinked, that are willing to actually have the conversation. We got a bunch of county commissioners that are willing to have the same conversation. But I just think that we have to protect their front and their back by giving them the information that's necessary in order for them to make an intelligent decision. Right. And that has to prove out that it's, from a data standpoint, if I would bring in Ed Solomon, have him run through some data analysis on whether or not these are flat curves, or we're not going to be able to get access to the Castville records before you have the certification process. So then you have to start looking at what kind of modeling can you do to show the probability of any of this stuff happening, right?
For the fiasco that went on in Denver, and basically not letting me speak to something that honestly Colorado's voting systems are irrelevant, because they were talking about BIOS passwords and the security breach. And that's what I've done for 2 decades now, is security. I currently do it for the Missile Defense Agency. They sort of take it serious. And so the facts that they're using all this legalese, it's time for you people to stand up and get, because you do need the data. Because the math, and Joe's right, the math can tell you that there was stuff. And I'm going to digress for about a minute and tell you of the stuff that I've done in an operational environment. It's called Security Operations Centers, where you basically fight the bad guys from the tech point of view. And then there's what's called an incident response, a CERT, a cyber incident response team that's on standby to do quick emergency forensics to find out what went on, who attacked, what happened. And how do those guys get alerted? You have these things called signatures, and things will pop on consoles and do all that, but you get data and you do the math. And it's just like myself and Dr. Walter Daughtry were talking way back when, before a federal case a couple years back. Math can't lie. And when you model it out and you see certain things, that's an anomaly. If you're in the Security Operations Center, you tell the CERT team, grab the network traffic, grab server images, start the investigation. You grab everything and you do a complete, hey, like you're going for the physical and the doctor just asked you to lean over the table, right? Because, guys, he's about to check. And I hate to be that kind of crude, but that's the way you have to go about it, because you're looking for malware. And you don't know whether it's some kiddie scripter or whether it's some foreign advanced persistent threat or whether it's just criminal advanced persistent threat. And that's the way it has to be conducted. You just don't go out and, oh, we'll change the passwords and have people that don't even know what they're looking at look at it and say everything's good when we don't even know who downloaded it. They've lied to you. This is what should really infuriate Coloradans, is your state government's lying to you. So anyway, I'm sorry.
First thing, I got the email, but I'm like back-to-back stuff, so I didn't even know what the purpose of the call was. I just heard Clay was going to be on. I thought that sounds like fun. So I was just going to ask, whose call is it and what do they want out of the call? Because there's a lot of things that could be done. And, you know, I don't want to say that Clay and Joe and Mark and I always have access to Grind, but we always have, you know, objectives and agenda, but that doesn't mean it's the agenda for the call. And then I saw somebody comment about also trying to get records before certification. And the restriction, what the restriction actually is, and it's under CRS Title 24, which is state government, under the section on open records. And what it actually states is that ballots are not to be made available prior to certification. And it includes in the definition of ballots something totally inappropriate, which is all digital representations of the ballot, including image. So they interpret the cast vote record as a digital representation of the ballot for the purpose of restricting public access to it, but then don't include it as the definition of a ballot when it comes to preservation of records under both statute, Colorado state statute and federal statute, which is all totally wrong. Also, I saw somebody else, and I can't remember who said it, say something about them having to have the cast vote records for the risk limiting audit. And that's true, but you have to understand also that the version of the cast vote records that are outputted from the voting systems into the Corla or risk limiting audit software is not the version that they give the public. The public will get either a comma separated value or Excel type file or a PDF file, but they're doing the original JSON files into the Corla process. And therein lies the problem, among other problems with risk limiting audits, which is, you know, the hardware is unaudited and unsecure. The software is unaudited, unsecure. The random seed is inappropriately done according to the Colorado administrative code, because it requires 20 rolls of a single 10-sided die, not 20 rolls of any number of 10-sided die. So they're not complying. Every time they do it, it's a misdemeanor. We could go on and on about these things, but I wanted to, this is for the GOP. It's really important. This is something really important. We're not getting satisfaction in state courts. It's quite obvious. Our attorney general is not investigating what he should. It's quite obvious. I've given him sworn affidavits. He refuses to investigate in violation of the law, and there's nobody in our state other than the people to hold him accountable, or if we bring a federal lawsuit on a civil rights basis for violation of Coloradoan civil rights and try to get satisfaction there, where he is compelled to either do his job or gets investigated and tried for deliberately refusing. But there is something for this and every election while we still have it and they don't gut the law in Colorado statute, and that is the canvass boards.
Yeah.
The canvass boards are in control of certification of the election. And in the case of recount, and we've had this discussion with several people, if you go read the statute about the authorities of the canvass board, this is under Title I. When you look under the section in Title I for recounts, the authority of the canvass board, I don't want to say it's plenipotentiary, but it is immense. The canvassing board, in the case of a recount, has the authority to request and review any documentation related to any vote that they're asked to count and canvass. That means anything to do with the registration, the source of the registration, which is denied to the public, the signature, the dates of the registration, the voting history of the voters, the provenance of ballots, when they went out, when they were ordered, when they came back, the USPS records, ballot drop box records, how they were scanned, by what machine, the maintenance records, anything they want, they are entitled to. And they can use any clerks and assistants they wish, and there is no restriction in the statute. So if you're a canvassing board and you want to bring in a cyber forensic examiner, you have the authority to designate them as your assistants. If you want to ask for records on every single signature verified with respect to the election you're being asked to recount, you can do it. And right now, so a year ago, a little over a year ago, it was still the law in Colorado that if a recount was conducted, the county, that's correct, that's only for recounts, but you have to also look at they have other authorities under a normal canvass, but that's true. I'm talking about for recounts. Specifically for recounts in Colorado statute, up until I think it was June of 23, the canvassing board was and still is in charge of a recount, but the canvassing board was required to select at random a tabulator that was used during the election, and then to do a manual comparison count of every ballot run through that tabulator in the election, and then compare that manual comparison count to the machine count from the election, and only if they matched or matched except for human errors from the manual comparison count could they proceed with a machine recount. The Secretary of State ignored that law every single recount in Colorado her entire term of office. And then when we called them out on it, they changed the statute. And the reason I'm bringing this up is right now the canvassing boards have the authority. But if we don't use it, they will gut that authority. I promise you.
Okay. Shawn, thank you for that. The call got started a little bit earlier because there were two different times it went out. Originally, we were going to start at 7:30, lay out all the objectives and what we were going to do. And this has been great. God's plans, his ways are not our ways. And I think we needed this time. And thank you guys for hanging in here with us. We're going to move on, and then we'll come back and bookend. You guys also have your hands up. I don't know if everybody still wants to speak or not, but let's bookend. Let's get Dave Willson, JAG attorney on, former JAG attorney. Dave, if you would unmute yourself and join us. Dave's going to speak, just tell us a little bit about himself. He was involved in Tina's recount in 22. He has put together a memorandum to the people of Colorado, as well as affidavits to go into the DAs and the different judicial districts. And so this is one of the things that will be happening. So, Mr. Willson, where art thou?
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. There you are. Okay. Hello. Great.
I'm here.
Thank you.
Hey, just background real quick. I grew up in New York. I spent 20 years in the Army as a JAG, did a lot of trial work, and then got into technology. I finished out my career helping stand up what is now Cybercom. So I worked for, unfortunately, General Hayden and then General Alexander, and then helped stand up Army cyberspace. So I do have a lot of background in this area. It's interesting to listen to all the technical speak and everything. I did help Tina with her recount, and as Shawn was just saying, Jenna changed the rules halfway through. And I told her after, I said, look, the courts just keep throwing us out. And I said, we need to go after a contract breach because you requested a recount. They told you how much it would cost. You paid that money. And the terms of that contract were written in the law of how a recount was supposed to be done. And instead, Jenna sent, and this was in 2022, sent out a memo with Dominion telling all the clerks, this is how you do a recount. So she violated the contract, but Tina had a lot going on, obviously, so we weren't able to pursue that. But she changed the rules back then, which was a violation of law. Anyway, since then, some great people asked me to, and last spring I ran for DA here in El Paso County. Unfortunately, I suspect there was cheating. And when you look at some of the great people I ran with, the low number of votes was incredible. How does one person who campaigns for 4 months only get 900 votes? That's just unheard of. So I'm hoping God's going to fix all that. Anyway, when I saw this going on, and I'm continuing to try and figure out what can I do to try and help Tina, I saw in the law, CRS 1-13-101, district attorney or attorney general to prosecute. That requires, if you fill out, and I put out a sample affidavit, and I know, I think Debbie did or Linda did as well. There's a number of them out there. But if you submit an affidavit to your local DA or to the attorney general, the law says they shall investigate, which under the law means they must. So they can't turn around. And I'll be honest, somebody asked our lovely DA here in El Paso, hey, what are you going to do about this breach of the password? Well, I don't have jurisdiction. That's what he said. Well, that's a lie. He has jurisdiction. And the memo I put together explains why he has jurisdiction and the steps you need to go through to put this affidavit together. And I won't name names, but there was 2 people who, as soon as I put this out last week, they right away went to the 4th Judicial District and filed their affidavits. I don't know if Alan approached the media or the media got wind of it and went to him, and he had to say, oh, we're waiting on Denver to investigate. And apparently, according to some of the signal threads, Park County, I think, said the same thing, and another county said the same thing. Everybody's waiting on Denver. I don't have any confidence in Denver, but with all this evidence that's being put together, we need to make sure we do our own investigation. So when these DAs come back and they say, oh, no, nothing to see here, don't look behind the curtain, we can start firing questions at them and go to the media and push them. And if we have to make them look stupid, well, it'll be easy. So,
Linda, help me. Who else was it that said, oh, no, we're waiting? Was it the Park County?
Yeah, actually, the CPR, Colorado Public Radio, put out an article today, too, saying just that the Denver District Attorney is investigating, and the El Paso DA is waiting for, they're cooperating, I think is how the article said it. The person who filed in Park County got the same response. So my goal is for us to unite our voices and to get at least one, if not 10, 50 out of each of the 22 judicial districts in Colorado, to get an affidavit sent to each DA so that each DA knows that there are members in their community that are not satisfied with the platitude of there's no problem, this isn't a real security breach. And when we join our voices together and hold them to account, it will keep this moving forward. Right now, they literally think they got away with just saying no big deal. And so we join our voices together. We file these. It is the means that they've given us by law to use our voices and to address our grievances. So we have a couple samples. There's actually 3 samples. Debbie and I are putting together instructions on how to find your DA's office address and stuff. So I would suggest taking these 3 samples, reading them, and piecing yours together from things that we've done and adding your own information in there and sending it to your DA. You're basically saying something's gone on here and we want you to do an investigation. And And I added a paragraph in there saying that there's no wiggle room for you to just hand this off to someone else. The statute says that you will do an investigation. So just trying to hold them to account. You can't just fluff it off. Maybe they could probably get away with saying that they're going to join in on an investigation. They probably could get away with that legally, but to just say I'm going to wait and see what the Denver DA does is completely unacceptable by the statute. So anyway, that's my goal with this. That's one of the calls to action tonight is everybody on this phone call. You spent an hour and a half now listening to us. So let's spend another half hour and put together a document, go down to your bank, get it notarized.
Well, listen, if you do an affidavit and you don't have collected information that accompanies it, they're going to file it in that thing called the round basket.
Well, I'll defer to Dave on that. Dave.
Yeah, we can. I just put in the link to Jenna's interview with News 9 because she admits everything right there. And this is an investigation.
That's not information that a DA is going to make a decision on.
No. They have to do an investigation, and this forces them to do an investigation.
DA can only do an investigation if there's probable cause in order to do that investigation. They have to have supportable evidence to show that this is what has happened collectively. You have to have experts that fill out, that do affidavits, and that has to be supported by models and things that show what those vulnerabilities are and what the likelihood is those vulnerabilities being exploited. If you put other, one of the reasons why the news hates, is that we come to there and we have feelings. This isn't about feelings, it's about facts. And I'm sorry if this hurts your feelings, Linda. I know I've hurt a lot of people's feelings, right? But the reality of it is if you want to get something done, you have to make sure that you have adequate information. So there are people in the media that will pick it up. As much as Clark.
Joe, look, I've already submitted affidavits to DAs, multiple DAs, and the Attorney General. And by the way, as an aside, the statement, we're waiting on this county, they don't have the authority to do that. The statute says they have concurrent authority with the Attorney General, not with another county. So they're required to investigate forthwith, exactly what Dave said. And the whole thing Joe's talking about, I understand where he's going, but this is a game they're playing. If the DA does not investigate forthwith, which is what they're required to do when they receive a sworn affidavit that alleges that a specific person has committed a violation, an offense of election law under Title I Colorado Revised Statute, if they do not investigate, then they themselves are violating their duty, and the next affidavit should be to the Attorney General about that DA violating their duty. That is the enforcement mechanism. If the Attorney General will not investigate that, then now we either have to have a sheriff that will arrest them, or we have to go to a federal court and with a civil rights case. Because what Joe's talking about, I think, with the evidence, I've provided evidence. The evidence is not sufficient. No amount of evidence is going to be sufficient. The issue is not whether there's evidence.
I think, Shawn, what I was talking to is the models that show how the system works, right? The system architecture and how this vulnerability and anomalies attached to it. So we look at, out of 50 states.
I get what you're saying, but they don't understand it at all. And they're not, they're either going to try, in which case you can show that to them, or they're not going to try. Our problem is not them not getting evidence. Our problem is them not being willing to investigate. But talking about affidavits, there's a significant difference between affidavits and other types of like a declaration. And the affidavit that is referred to in the statute with respect to referring an election offense to a DA or the Attorney General, you must be able to attest to personal knowledge of the facts in the affidavit. Right. That means you have to understand what you're saying and the basis for it. If you don't sign it.
Right. Personal, first person.
This is what Yvette Roberts in our NAACP civil suit. Yvette Roberts was the plaintiff's witness, and she got up on the stand after signing a declaration that she could personally attest, and then said, she didn't even know us, and she didn't know that USCIP was an organization until the plaintiff's lawyers told her. So she could be prosecuted for, a fraudulent affidavit. They won't do that. We're not going to do that. We want the lawyers, but
Do you think that watching Griswold's interviews and her basically confessing that these have been up there and that happened, is that considered personal knowledge to base your concern on, though?
Yeah, that's personal knowledge that the BIOS passwords are compromised. And let me help also. There is I can post it, but if you look on my Twitter or X feed, I posted an excerpt from a CISA publication that describes an adequate process for incident response. Griswold cannot pretend that she doesn't know who CISA is and that they issue guidance. They are the government. They are the government lead for security of the elections infrastructure government facilities subsector. So when they publish something that says this is a good incident response format, they are the authority as far as she is concerned, and she knows that because she already stated that she reported to them. So you can state from personal knowledge that she has said the BIOS passwords were compromised, for multiple months. And from personal knowledge, if you read the transcript or reporting about the Libertarian Party's suit, that the Deputy Secretary of State, Chris Beall, testified that they thought 34 counties were affected. And then you can read that CISA response and see, or that CISA guide for incident response, and see that it specifies the first thing that you do is not change the passwords. The first thing you do is stop using the system. The second thing you do is image to collect data and preserve it. And the third thing you do is technical analysis, none of which they did. At no point in time would you ever return a critical infrastructure system to use without conducting those steps and ensuring that any compromise on it had been remediated and that the system was clean. Which, by the way, in this case of these systems could not happen, but let's pretend that it could. It would only happen after qualified cyber forensic personnel had conducted an investigation. Sending an imbecile like their CISO out to change the passwords is just the absolute perfect epitome of government incompetence in a cover-up.
So
100%.
Beall has said that the first thing, well, Griswold did too, that the first thing they did was contact Dominion and CISA, and they, without telling the clerks for 5 days, they decided that there was no threat, that it was fine, everything's hunky-dory. So that's why they didn't. That's why they didn't tell the clerks. And I have audio of Christopher Beall telling one of the clerks that they weren't going to tell the clerks, which means they weren't going to respond to this in any way, shape, or form if they weren't going to tell the clerks. He said, oh, we had members out in the field, regular members out in the field the day that the GOP broke the story. You'll notice he puts the word regular in there because he had someone monitoring Elbert County, a regular SOS person, but it wasn't there to deal with these BIOS passwords. It's their cover-up. So part of what I have in my affidavit is that there's a clear cover-up going on, and they're colluding in their cover-up because they're obviously colluding in their cover-up to cover up what happened. So I want them to look into that. It's like, look into this.
Wow.
So that's thank you, Shawn. That's really good information. So everybody, you got to go watch that video now, and you can put a file up yourself in affidavit.
A couple of points, because the representative spoke earlier. He's correct. I can tell you that John Case had already had me working on an affidavit concerning this, and that was going forward. So there were efforts going. That when the Libertarian Case came and they rushed, and I think that hurt us in a way because too there wasn't enough prep time. I wasn't done to get it to be an expert witness. And also, the affidavit I had, we couldn't even get it done in time. I quickly changed it to a declaration to submit it. So, and I think Linda just asked me in that. I'm going to get the affidavit part. I will get it notarized, the original that should have been applied, and send it to you guys. Shawn, I'm just going to give it to you, and you can forward it on to the appropriate people, because there's a lot of people on here I haven't dealt with in Colorado yet. And so I'll get it to Shawn, so y'all will have that. I like this approach. Honestly, because they tried to downplay and say 36 counties or whatever. You got to get all 63 counties, and I know there's different jurisdictions and they may cover several counties, but get all of them complaining, because I just don't see them taking any action until it's a full court pressure push on them. Because my outside opinion, everything that I've dealt with in Colorado courts is just, it's just totally upset me. And to think that I spent over 2 decades in uniform trying to defend this republic, and it's turned into Marxism, at least up there. And so and Joe, I hear you on gathering the evidence. I think the main thing is with Shawn's affidavit and what I've already provided, if they don't start the investigation, they got to secure the assets first.
Well, I'm just saying that
the sheriffs have to act on that, and so that's what I feel needs to be done. And so that's
Clay,
what I'll do.
But Clay, if you take the information, you combine it with some models that are known to follow the system architecture of it, you can also put the adverse pressure on them from the media side. I don't know if there's an appetite on that side or not, but if you're going to serve it to the counties, to the DAs in those counties and the AG, you should simultaneously serve it upon the news agency and see if any of them have any balls to cover it.
So I hear you, but here's what I'm going to tell you. You've got to fight them in their own arena. And 2, I like the part, because I agree, the shall part, especially from contractual means, that's an absolute. If you don't do it, you're in trouble, period. And so it has to be done. It has to be done. And so you've got them there. Second, it's what I spent time on, people. You got to realize risk analysis and assessment. I beat the CIO office, the Health and Human Services. They went through their whole program's travel budget on me in less than a year because they wanted me in person. I won them because they didn't do risk analysis and assessment. On what basis did they assign this? You can get me, you can get Mark, you can get anybody to tell you that any passwords is a serious security breach, but these were BIOS passwords that give you access to the actual hardware components where you can bypass any operational security. Any 2-year security professional is going to be able to testify under oath that that's severe, and that basically you could do 1,000 things with this, right? And that's the point that needs to get out. I think, but you got to get the pressure on now, get the affidavit submitted, so you've got people complaining, because what the state did was compromise. And 2, does the county purchase the systems in Colorado? I don't know. Do they?
Yes.
They do?
Yes, they do.
Hey, the state compromised your systems. Now what do? They cost you the integrity of your systems. I'm telling you, in DOD, and Shawn will back me up. I know he said they have these huge things. When you deal with an advanced persistent threat, you can hire the top-notch people to come in and check these components, and they won't give you 100% certainty it's clean. They're going to tell you, put it in the shredder. Depending on the type of attack and the advanced persistent threat used, they're going to tell you, put that piece of hardware into the shredder and turn it into shavings, basically. And that's what happens.
If anyone's serious,
right?
Yeah,
because they can hide it anywhere, right, Mark?
They throw them in the shredder
anywhere. So they've cost the county, and they violated your act. This is the way you've got to pursue it. The state violated the counties, and guess what? You're going to pay the price. And so, and with that, though, people, I really got to go. I'll get my affidavit. I'll get my declaration, turn an affidavit, and give it to Shawn so he can disperse it to the right people. It's a pleasure. I want y'all to act. I hate to say it, act like Georgians. Get everybody fired up. Be at your capital peacefully, and put the pressure on them, because that's what's got to happen.
What has to happen?
Don't let them certify. Shawn is right on the canvassing. You got to stop them.
Let's jump over to our next call to action. Candice, our Canvas Board extraordinaire, approaching the subject of not certifying this election. And please understand, I believe it's the 27th is the deadline, November 27th.
Okay, thank you, Debbie. the certification in El Paso County is on the 27th. So it's in a window. That risk limiting audit is sometime around the 18th. So the following week is the final certification or the signing ceremony. Let me just explain to most of the people what the Canvas Board is, how it's structured, and what it can and cannot do. Shawn explained some incredible superpowers there of the Canvas Board member I didn't know I had. I think he's referring to when a recount is being conducted. But on an ordinary election, the Canvas Boards across all 64 counties are composed of an odd number of members. There's usually 3 or 5. And both of the major parties are represented, and then the county clerk and recorder is the third or the middle member to cast the split vote or cast the tie vote. And as the Canvas Board member alone, you have an important role, but your power is limited according to how you align with your other 2 Canvas Board members. For example, there are several of us in the state that are known to be serial decertifiers. I'm one of them, and every time I cast that decertifying vote, I accompany it with a large, highly detailed minority report as to why I took that position. However, in the absence of one of the other Canvas Board members in the county joining my vote, my voice just becomes what's called a minority vote. I'm only one of 3. And it isn't until usually that the Canvas Board member will align with the clerk before their vote actually becomes a decertifying vote and will actually have impact in the overall certification of the election across the state. So that's an important thing to talk about in itself right now. The Canvas Board members are appointed by the party chairman. I was appointed by Chairman Vicki Tompkins in El Paso County. Now, the Democrats also appoint their Canvas Board member. So in this discussion we're having here and everything that we've learned from all of these experts, we are now super informed as to if ever we were going to decertify an election, this would be the time to do it. Now, again, what I'm saying, I may be the inspired one on my board to make the decertification, but it's going to take me joining up with my clerk in order to make this count. Now, that doesn't mean that individually each of the Canvas Board members shouldn't be decertified. No, they most certainly should decertify. And on any given days, there's a laundry list of reasons why we could decertify, everything from the dirty voter rolls, which are persistent even now, to the Swiss cheese operation at the back door due to mail-in voting. There's countless reasons, but we have been served up the best reason we're going to see in our lifetime with this BIOS violation, this BIOS breach. So I encourage every single person, every chair on this call, and every Canvas Board member on this call, and if there's clerks on this call, to particularly pay attention. But we need to, I just want to say, because the Canvas Board members are an extension of the party leadership, they are essentially operating under the authority of the party. Even though they do voice their opinion independently of even their chair, they're allowed to author their report and to make their own choices. But I'm encouraging Canvas Board members within our purview, staying in our lane in the party, to exercise that responsibility. But when it comes to the clerks, not all of the clerks are Republican. And we want to hold their feet to the fire as Republican Canvas Board members. And ideally, other people on the other side of the aisle would see the gravity of this, the egregiousness of the breach. And if anybody were right thinking, they would decertify no matter what party they are, because it affects all of our elections equally. But when it comes to some people's urgency to want to send barrage emails to the clerks and tell them not to decertify. I personally discourage that. I think that we should approach the clerks individually. They have a lot to consider. By the way, they're still wrapping up this election. We haven't even finished counting in El Paso County. It's been one of the most difficult elections I've seen. They're exhausted from it. And for them to, at this point, be getting a barrage of kind of hate mail about twisting their arm to decertify this election, what you're asking them to do is to decertify all the work that they have just gone through this week. So you have to just take it in context of what this is sounding like to the clerk and recorders. We need to entreat them to see this the way that we have learned tonight. We need to share the information that they obviously haven't had access to like we have. I'm just asking you to please treat your clerks with tender, loving care as you approach them. And I don't believe an email and an email barrage is the way to do it. I believe you need to get in there, talk with them one-on-one, share the facts, share everything they don't know, the double passwords, the fact that you can access remote access to the machines, all the misnomers that we have been fed through Jenna's lies. And Ron Hanks wrote a great letter this afternoon that really enumerated all the misperceptions, misconceptions that we've been fed. And so, but anyway, I'm saying, please treat the clerks respectfully, go one-on-one to them. And if we are able to make a marriage between a clerk and a consenting canvass board member, we want to know about it. We want to help you with that. Because if we are even able to get 1, 2, or 3 of these clerk canvass board member pairs, we have got a very real possibility of decertifying this election. And that opens up an entirely new pathway for us. So thank you.
Yeah, Candice, speak to the fact, and Shawn, you may know this, and Linda as well, to the fact that if there's even just one county that does not certify the election, that affects the entire state. Is that correct?
It is correct. She will have to deal with every solid decertification, meaning, like I said, the clerk and canvass board member in agreement. She will then have to stop and consider the merits of course, with the decertification, sorry, the correct term is failure to certify, not decertify. I've been recently corrected on that. She has to investigate the failure to certify individually and to investigate the merits of their that accompany the vote. In other words, there's a report that will accompany the report from the county to the secretary. And so then she will have to ultimately report back on her consideration of the report. And then it could be that she would override that vote and elect to certify all by herself. But I'm thinking if we had not just one, not 2 or 3, if we had several that we were able to pair up, because if ever we had a reason to do it, this is the time. To say one other thing in full disclosure, really since I believe it was when Wayne Williams was Secretary of State, which was like 2016, the duties of the canvass board members have been dumbed down. And now it's revised statute 1-10-105.5, Linda, 5 or 1. Anyway, it restricts the duties of the canvass board member to verifying certain sets of numbers that are fed to the canvass board member by the staff. There's really no way to verify where the numbers came from, verify their veracity, but all you are asked to do is to match a set of numbers that's set before you. And as you're under a lot of pressure with everybody in the room expecting you to sign, this is a signing ceremony. It's not you're not there not to certify. Believe me, the expectations are very high that you're going to just roll with it. But the parameters are your verifying that the number of ballots counted does not exceed the number of ballots cast. And then there's another parameter called the abstract of votes, which is a breakdown by precinct that verifies that the number of registered voters in any precinct does not exceed, the number of votes does not exceed the number of registered voters. So that's it. Those two numerical qualifiers, those two numerical values are what you are asked to attest to. So this whole idea of me having a minority report, I will have to agree the numbers match, because anybody with, who can see that the numbers match. But what I will say is that parameter, that statute, is insufficient grounds on which to certify an election. And I think that everybody on this call can agree to that. So I will then write what's called a minority report, and I will spell out my multitudinous reasons why I have elected not to certify. But just so that you are aware, the statutes are literally very restrictive on which you can and cannot certify on. So I just want to make sure you have full disclosure on that you are definitely outside the lane by casting a dissenting vote.
Amen. Candice and I have been talking about this for a couple of years. Griswold has been centralizing her authority on our elections. This is one area that it's just gone really far. So you are essentially supposed to certify that one computer output of numbers matches another computer output of numbers, and that's all you're supposed to be certifying. I would think maybe you could sign it under duress and then add your report to it. Because yes, okay, I can see these two numbers that you printed off match, but I don't really agree that this certifies the election, like Candice said. So, and because of this egregious security breach that Griswold created, this makes that even trying to match those two computer generated numbers under question. That's why Candice is saying, of all the years, this is the year for us to say, you can't even certify those two numbers, let alone all the other reasons that you can't certify this election. But now we don't even trust these two numbers because this system has been vulnerable for months and months and months. So that's my little input. Thank you, Candice, for all your
And I will also give a shout out to the clerks, at least at El Paso County. These people do a brilliant job. They account for every single sheet of paper in their possession, and they do it flawlessly. So it's very gutsy, and it borders on really disrespect for me to decertify. But if you look at it and realize the numbers are only painting a picture of the ballots that are entering the room and the ballots that are leaving the room in storage boxes, and then the numbers describing them. It says nothing to do of security, it has nothing to do with the drop box. It has nothing to do with the fact that you can't verify who filled out every single ballot. You can't verify the voter rolls. There's so many more moving parts to an election than just these matching numbers. Right. So I am pushing back on that statute. I'm pushing back every single time. And I believe, of course, we have to do so now, because this breach is not going to be reflected in those numbers. I promise you the numbers are still going to match. But we have to think bigger. We have to act bigger. We have to act boldly.
And thank you. And I would say,
I just want to quickly say the same thing. We are mad at these clerks. There's a couple of them who go out there and actually try and sell Dominion to other counties. Those clerks are still questionable in my mind. But in general, these county clerks are doing their best. They're following the statutes. They are dotting every I and crossing every T. They are I admire the amount of work that they put into this and their dedication. Like I said, I think there's a handful who, quite frankly, I question whether they're getting money from Dominion also, but that's a question. It's a supposition. I can't prove it. So in general, yeah, we treat our clerks with respect. They're doing their best. J. Alex Halderman, Clint Curtis, they've all testified that you can change these elections and the clerks would never know you did it. So let's give them respect.
Yeah, truly, this for all of the clerks and for the Canvas board members, this is an Esther moment of such a time as this, to step up and step out of your comfort zone and do the right thing for the people in your county and for the people in the state and for the other 25 states that have been impacted. So I have a couple of hands up here. Mark, if you would just introduce yourself, tell us what county you're from, and do you have a question or a comment?
Both.
Okay.
I'm from Boulder County.
Okay.
Where obviously we have not certified an election in many years.
Right.
But right now, based on how the statute has been changed, specifically 110.105.5, and item 2 removed, that gave us the ability in the past not to certify the elections for whatever reasons, of which there are multitudes. The way it has been watered down, and that we're only doing an accounting procedure of the ballots and not the votes, I don't see any way to do this other than to certify it, especially in 110.101. You're taking an oath. In violation of that oath is misconduct of the individual. I'm talking to our attorney to find out legally the ramifications of that. If a canvass board member could be held liable for not certifying for other reasons, and we'll continue to look into it. So I want to, Candice, I mean, you gave the exact reasons to certify, I think, because they took the teeth out of the law. And so I'm recommending to our canvass board member that they certify the election, unfortunately, but put exceptions in for the password breach, for the lack of surveillance on our drop boxes, for the discrepancies in undeliverable ballots between the Postal Service and the county clerks, and a couple other reasons on top of that.
So,
all those reasons should be reasons not to certify.
Right.
Exactly.
But the duties of the canvass board member are specifically specified in statute. So by not certifying, you're not following the duties of the canvass board.
It's time to paint outside the lines.
There you go. Mike Cowan, you're up, sir. Just unmute yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Debbie. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, just let everybody know where you're from, please.
My name's Mike Cowan. I'm the chair of the Saguache County GOP. And my question is for Candice. And I want to find out, as chairman, do I have to appoint someone else to be a member of the canvass board? Can the chairman be a member of the canvass board instead of appointing someone?
Thank you, Mike, for that question. The appointment of the canvass board member is established 15 days before the election commences. So that's an agreement. Should it be communication between the party chair and the clerk establishing who is going to be your canvass board member? I don't think there's any reason why you couldn't do it yourself. But there's just a few provisions. If the canvass board member is unable to fulfill their duties, then they might be able to be replaced. But I don't think you can change horses midstream.
Candice, that's a really, following up on that, if the GOP chairs have not appointed someone, does the clerk fall back to the person that was a canvass board member in the last election?
I think that's what they do. And I think sometimes it could go on and on and on, like for years and decades, and they never swap out. They never reconfirm it. But it's on the SOS calendar that these, affirmations of who your canvass board member needs to be recertified, not certified, bad word, reestablished before every election. And this is our third election this year.
Okay.
So that you have to re-up the contract with the canvass board member, but I don't think it happens. Yeah.
The hell with that, Shawn. I'm just kidding.
Mr. Haggerty, it's around here somewhere.
So I wanted to respectfully, and I understand the basis of it, and maybe this is a longer discussion, but I want to respectfully disagree with Mr. Milliman. I understand that the attempt has been made by the Secretary of State and her minions or the people doing her work in the General Assembly to restrict the duties of the canvass board for the canvass of the election itself, not the recount. For the recount as well, but this is what we're talking about, just the actual certification of election results. But I want to encourage people to look at two things. And the first is for them to look specifically at 110.101 subpart 4, where it says that any individual on a canvass board pursuant to this article is immune from liability if in any proceeding that's based on an act or omission of the individual, if he or she was acting in good faith and within the scope of his or her official functions. That's first. Now I want to go back and look at the explicit language of 110.101.5, the duties of the canvass board. Subparagraph 1, subsection A. Reconcile the ballots cast. What is a cast ballot? A cast ballot is a ballot provided, an authentic ballot provided by an eligible voter through a means designated by the election official and the statutes in the state. An elector is allowed to cast their ballot by putting into the post office drop box or into a mailbox, by handing it to a mail carrier, by inserting it into the ballot box in a voting place, by handing it to an election official, or by putting it into a drop box. It is cast at the moment that they do that. Now, once it's received in a county, the county determines or verifies the eligibility of the voter and the fact that they have not previously cast a ballot. But the act of casting the ballot is them providing to one of those authorized means. Now, how does a canvass board know how many ballots were cast? They have to know how many ballots were put into every drop box, and it could be any drop box in the state. How many ballots were put into any post box, and it has to be any post box anywhere in the world. Because you're allowed to mail a ballot back, international mail, to get to U.S. mail, to get to the state, to get to the county. They have to know how many were handed to election officials, how many were deposited in drop boxes, how many were duplicated. If they do not have confidence that they have an accurate tally of all the ballots cast, how can they possibly reconcile ballots cast? They cannot. Then they have to confirm that the number of ballots counted. In order to know the number of ballots counted, they have to know how many have been received for the ballots that apply to the jurisdiction that they are asked to canvass. They have to know how many ballots were received by any election official in the state of Colorado. So you could take a ballot for El Paso County and drop it in a drop box. Clerks do not do this. Clerks have no idea of any of this, I assure you. And also on that comment, I recognize what Mark is saying, and I know I have met and discussed some of these things with many clerks. I think there are good public servants that are trying to do their best under very trying circumstances in an environment that is rife with fraud and lies. But I also say at some point when you are under oath, you don't get any credit for keeping the trains on time to Auschwitz.
That's right.
I don't care how good you are at keeping the trains on time. You have to recognize whether you are doing the right thing or not.
Yeah, that's right.
So I don't want to go through it word by word, but when you look at the duties of the canvass board, look at the definition: ballots cast, ballots counted. And then the number of registered electors. How do you have any idea how many registered electors there are in that location? Certainly,
you don't even know if they're alive.
You cannot base it upon what the Secretary of State is telling you, because she has lost now. She's being ordered by a court to reveal how many dead voters are on the registration. Right. She had to be forced under a settlement agreement with Judicial Watch. Unfortunately, not a good remedy. We had evidence from the citizen canvassing that those rolls were inaccurate, and nothing has been done to fix it, and the clerks are not in control of their own rolls. So if you're a canvass board member and you want to know how many voters are registered in the precinct or the jurisdiction, how could you possibly know? And this is the problem. The last thing is the abstract of votes. What is in an abstract of votes? If you cannot personally attest to the information in the abstract of votes, how can you possibly certify? And I understand there's immense pressure, but but we didn't put citizens into this role in our statute so that citizens could say, well, whatever the clerk says.
Mm-hmm.
The clerk shouldn't even be part of the canvass board. Their job is to execute it. Citizens' job is to say, yes, we believe this to be true. And if they can't do that, then the entire premise of keeping all these records from the rest of the citizens until after certification is eviscerated. So I would say, as long as you are acting in good faith and you understand the language in the statute, then if you don't believe that you have the evidence necessary to reconcile ballots cast or to reconcile the number of voters, then you can't certify.
Right.
Yeah, I want to say something because a lot of people keep looking over this. Mail-in ballots. The ballot shows up to be processed. It's got a signature on the outside sometimes, hopefully most of the time, and it's got some information on the front of it. And the people there during signature verification are supposed to verify the signature on the front of the ballot and the information on the front against the records that they have on file for that requisite voter. So let's just say, for example, all the information verifies, the signature looks legitimate, even though the people that are verifying the signature are not properly trained or certified to do even such a thing. But let's just assume the signature is verified. They open the envelope and pull the ballot out. Please, someone tell me how anyone would have any idea who definitively filled the ballot out that's inside the envelope.
Right.
That's the big elephant in the room. There is no way to know who filled out the ballot inside any mail-in envelope that is returned, regardless of what information is verified.
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Yeah, thank you.
Hey, thanks for your patience. I wanted to jump on earlier, but I'm dealing with a household of sick children, so I was able to get away, and my wife's handling it right now. But I wanted to at least give everyone an update on the party front as to what we're doing. Real quick though, I want to thank Shawn for really blowing the whistle on this one. I got the information obviously before the news broke because the party was the one to send the press release out. But really the hero here is, Shawn and everyone else that helped him uncover what was going on. We were happy to partner with exposing it, and, thankful that we were at least able to get some eyes looking at this, and it certainly blew up. But now the question is, what do we do from here? Just let everyone know, we've been working on, a lawsuit or a plan for a lawsuit ever since the news broke. We're working with one of our attorneys that we're working with is Kurt Olson. I'm sure many of you have heard who he is. The question that we've been wrestling with is how best to pursue this. And initially, it's still our plan moving forward is to initiate a federal lawsuit as opposed to a state lawsuit. And just to make it clear to everyone, the party never opposed the Libertarians lawsuit using a 113 action in state court. We just felt that we weren't going to find any success going down that route, so we never pursued it. They did ask us after they initiated it, and I told them that I'd take a look at it with our attorneys, but we ultimately decided not to join in on it because one, we didn't really have the time nor the resources to open up a battlefront on that, and two, we just didn't feel it would succeed. The Colorado court system is one where you really don't get a lot of justice, especially if you're a Republican. But we certainly wish them the best, and we didn't oppose anything that they were putting forward. It just wasn't, from our standpoint, the right way to go. So we wanted to focus solely on our federal case that we are still currently working on and drafting. Admittedly, and this is, I think, Kurt's opinion as well as a few of the other attorneys we looked at it, the ruling from the trial district court judge in the 113 state hearing, that admittedly kind of makes our job a little bit tougher because they get to, quote, be the finder of fact in the case. And even if they're not right in their findings, it's still a shield that can be used in any other future litigation. And that's, additionally a problem that we have to contend with. And we're trying to figure out how best to safeguard against that if and when we go to federal court. So it's another reason why we weren't really keen on going to Denver District Court. Needless to say, right now, our attorney, I have the draft in front of me. It's a good draft, but we're ultimately, with the relief we're seeking in federal court is preservation of evidence, making sure that all the system logs and all that are not only secure and safe, but they can then be handed off to us for an independent forensic audit, so that we can actually get into it and see what happened and when. That's in a nutshell. I know I'm not using all the right technical terms, but that's effectively what it is. We're just trying to preserve all the evidence we can so that we can look at everything that happened and determine what may have gone wrong. And we think that a federal judge would be more persuadable to giving that kind of relief, especially since this leak was a severe problem that should never have happened. But that's on that front. And then the second front we've been working on, and a little bit of hope is that that's sort of happening independently. But our job the past week or so that we've been looking at this is finding sympathetic law enforcement officials or prosecutors that would actually hold Jenna Griswold to a standard. It's been said often by many in this chat and of course in the news that Tina Peters is now facing a 9-year prison sentence. And if you look at the grand jury indictment that was originally put towards Tina, from my non-lawyer background, I could at least see 5 or 6 charges that could easily be replicated against Jenna. And I think ultimately there's got to be one of two things needs to happen. They either pardon Tina or they prosecute Jenna. But in no way, shape, or form should Jenna be able to get away from the standard that she created and held Tina to. That's deeply hypocritical, and we're going to try and do what we can to hold Jenna's feet to the fire. But I ultimately think we need to, push for the governor to realize that this hypocrisy is so great that the only true justice that can be done here is to grant Tina some clemency and get her out of prison. There's no reasonable person in this world who should be able to say with a straight face that Tina has to serve any prison time while Jenna Griswold can get off scot-free. That's just unimaginable. So those are the two things that we've been working on. Again, we support the Libertarians and what they're doing. It's just that wasn't the legal avenue that we were going to pursue given the limited resources that we have. But again, I want to thank everyone who helped get this into the public, and whatever we can do at the party level, we will. We've always tried to push forward election integrity and ballot security, and this is one of the things that we're not going to let go if we can help it.